It's not hard to find complaints in the gaming world about remakes and remasters. I understand some of the complaints. When you have games being remade or remastered that were only released a few years ago, it can feel like a cash grab. On the positive side though, remaking or remastering games can allow you to play games that are on systems that are no longer easily accessible, games you maybe never got the chance to experience. This is how it was for me with the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy. Despite hearing a lot about the Phoenix Wright series over the years, I had never played any of the games. The first game in the series was released way back on the Game Boy Advance in 2001. The series continued to be focused on handhelds, releasing on the 2DS and the 3DS. Having never really been a huge fan of handhelds, it meant I never really had the chance to play the games. That was until the first 3 games were made into a collection for PC and modern consoles. So let's see what I thought about the series now that I've had the chance to play it about 20 years behind the curve. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy is a mix of visual novel and adventure game developed by Capcom. It is a collection of the first 3 Phoenix Wright games and was released in this form in 2019 for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PC, and Xbox One. I am playing the PS4 version for this review. The game costs about $29.99, which breaks down to about $10 for each game in the collection when at full price. The game is rated T due to violence, blood, and suggestive themes, but to be honest, I would say that this is on the lower end of that. A lot of the cases do deal with murder and there is blood involved, but it's also hard to call the series too mature themed. There are a number of challenges in dealing with the story of the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy. The first is that this is a trilogy of games, so trying to give a nice, neat summary of 3 different games is difficult. Second, each game also contains a number of separate cases that are their own story. Sometimes these are connected to each other, while others are more standalone. Finally, the game is pretty heavy on the mystery and trying to find the truth about each of the cases you are dealing with, and it can be kind of hard to say too much without giving away major plot points. In general, though, you are playing as Phoenix Wright. You start the series off as a rookie defense attorney, and in each case you are trying to defend your client and get to the real truth behind the case, which usually isn't the same as what is originally presented at all. While this is the general premise, the world of Phoenix Wright is full of weird tensions and odd juxtapositions, realities that sit side by side and shouldn't work, but somehow do. The world is colorful, vibrant, and ridiculously over the top with some supernatural elements to boot. However, the world doesn't always really match up with this kind of bright tone very well. Murder is surprisingly common in the Phoenix Wright universe, as every case you deal with in these 3 games all have to do with murder, at least eventually. Not only that, but so many of the same cast of characters are connected to these murders in some way or the other, that it seems a rather dangerous world. Or that your main cast of characters just really need to start hanging around some better people. There is also a weird tension with the legal system in the game. The legal system seems to be pretty highly revered, but as you enter into the world of Phoenix Wright, you realize it is super broken. People seem falsely accused all the time, police are comically inept, witnesses commit perjury regularly, and the prosecutors are ridiculously corrupt, even to the point of falsifying evidence or holding evidence back in order to keep their guilty verdicts. I understand why this is the case. It is the story's way to set us up for the gameplay that consists of finding lies and contradictions to move the story on ahead. This reality was also an element of the game that just felt wrong after a while and just kind of grated on me over time. It kind of works, but I wonder if there wouldn't have been a better way to do things. This weird tension is also found in my enjoyment of the cases that you are involved in. It always felt a bit contrived to have a lot of the cases being centered on some of the main characters in the cast, but these cases also tended to be the most enjoyable and gave the satisfaction of progress in larger story arcs. The cases that were more one-offs didn't always have the weight to them to make you care quite as much. It gives the weird effect of having the cases that felt more unlikely to be the ones that held the most impact and were most enjoyable. One other thing I feel like I have to mention in regards to the Phoenix Wright games and the story is the colorful cast of characters. For the most part, characters are designed to make a lasting impression on you, but also tend towards being larger-than-life caricatures. This means that there doesn't always seem to be a lot of depth to these characters. Sadly, this also pertains to the main cast, although more care is given to them, just maybe not as much as I would have liked. That's not to say that the characters here aren't enjoyable and memorable, they just lack a certain amount of depth. There are certain times that a case will get more serious and that there are some major developments, but they don't always seem to stick in terms of character development. Winning cases, even against people who have never lost a case, doesn't really seem to make Phoenix more confident. Maya winds up being the clueless sidekick for a while in the game, despite being through a lot of rough stuff, and things like that pop up regularly. Plot points will stick in the world, but they don't always seem to have the impact you would think from a character building point of view. This doesn't mean that I didn't grow fond of the characters. In fact, I enjoyed much of the main cast. I also enjoyed some of the characters that you only got to see once or twice. I just really grew to like them by the end of their cases. Now, that's not to say that there weren't characters that I didn't like. I found some of them to be super annoying. I'm looking at you, Mr. Butts and Old Bag. But admittedly, some of these seem intended to be on the annoying side, and I think that's kind of the desired reaction. Despite the weird tensions of the game and the characters that maybe weren't as deep as I would have liked, I still did enjoy the story in Phoenix Wright. As I said, the cases that centered around events in the main characters' lives tended to be some of the best as they progressed a larger storyline, but it is also a bit weird that these characters have so much murder in their lives. If you're able to live with that tension, you'll probably enjoy what Phoenix Wright has to offer. I hope that was enough to give you a sense of the story and kind of what to expect from Phoenix Wright without giving away spoilers and kind of too much of the plot that you'll discover in the games. With that finished up, it's time to move to the gameplay of the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series. The games are divided into two different types of gameplay, trial and investigation. All of the games start out with you learning about the trial sections first, so I'll address that first as well. The main aspect of gameplay in the trial is to find the lies and contradictions in a witness testimony in order to find the truth. You can do this by doing two possible actions: press and present. If you press a statement, you'll basically ask a follow-up question to their statement. This may reveal new information or might not really do anything for you depending on the statement you use it on. This can be a good way to get witnesses to expand their testimony if you can't find any of their statements to be something that you can really present evidence against. Presenting evidence or character profiles, which starts to be an option in the second game, is your way of providing evidence for a contradiction or answering questions using the clues you've collected and the people who are associated with the case that are stored in your court record, which is kind of like your inventory. Have a witness that gives a time that is way off from the autopsy report's time of death. Present the autopsy report to show that these things don't line up. These are the kind of things that you'll find yourself doing by presenting evidence, using them to contradict something that a witness has said wrongly. It's a fairly straightforward system, but the trick is figuring out where you need to present a piece of evidence. If you give a wrong answer or provide the wrong piece of evidence, you'll lose part of your health bar up in the top right corner. If you lose it all, it is game over and you'll have to reload your most recent save. There are certain times where just giving one wrong answer will cause a game over, but the game is usually pretty good at telling you when these times are. The second type of gameplay is investigation. This has you traveling to all the locations associated with a certain case, talking with people and trying to find evidence that you can use for the trial parts of the game. This part will remind you a lot of point and click adventures where you're going places and finding various useful items and pieces of information to use later on. Now, you don't have to worry about missing any items or any pieces of information, as the game won't progress the story until you've found everything you need for the future trials. Now, sometimes in your discussions with characters, you will have to present evidence to open up new dialogues and information in the investigation mode. There is also an addition to this in the second and third games of the series called Psylocks. This is an ability Phoenix gains that allows him to know when people are lying to him and hiding the truth. When this happens, you'll have to present a series of items or profiles to unlock a secret that they are keeping from you. Now, while investigating, you are given up to 4 different options, at least if there is someone to talk to at that location. You can examine the current location, which will allow you to comment on various parts of the area or find evidence if something is important enough. You can move to another location to search for clues or people to talk to elsewhere. If there are characters at a location, you can talk with them or present them with an item from the court record in order to learn more about the case. Overall, the gameplay elements are pretty straightforward and the game's systems aren't complex in the least. I do have a few minor complaints here though. The first is that the game has a set path it wants you to take. You need to find certain evidence to present to certain people at certain times, and it's up to you to figure out what and when that is needed to do. This applies mostly to the trial portion, but is also in the investigation part as well. This didn't really bother me too much, but I imagine that if you're one who likes to find creative solutions to puzzles, or one who finds more details to be contradictory, you may be annoyed. The game doesn't really care if you found other options. It has a certain path it wants you to take. Sometimes there may be multiple options to get there, but most of the time, there isn't. The other complaint is more minor, but was one that bothered me actually a little bit more. And this was that I would have loved a better move menu in the investigation mode. Sometimes you're not able to go to a location from the location you're currently in, and it can be kind of annoying. I just wish that the move option had all of your location options available that you've unlocked for that case. This is definitely more of a quality of life kind of thing, but I found myself getting annoyed having to travel through a number of locations to get where I knew I had to go. The art in the game is bright and colorful. The high point for me is the character art and animations. The Phoenix Wright characters are not just a colorful cast in regards to their personality. They are all unique looking and memorably designed. The remake just makes the characters look even nicer than the pictures I've seen in the handheld versions, and yeah, like they just are really memorable and really enjoyable to watch. Background areas are also nice and well detailed, but they are just static backgrounds and aren't quite as interesting or memorable as the characters. I still like them, they're still good, but they just aren't really the star in terms of the artwork for me. Now the soundtrack and sound effects are also well done for the game. The game is not fully voiced or anything, but it does give you voice lines for objection or hold it. These are pretty iconic lines, but I'd say that the soundtrack is more of the star here. It does a great job of matching the ebb and flow of the investigation and the trial. You have like fast-paced music for the intense revelations or times of potential danger, and more pensive ones when you're trying to puzzle out how to proceed in the case. It's a soundtrack that will probably stick with you long after you're done and was super enjoyable. I only had one possible issue in terms of performance with the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy, and that is that certain areas weren't on the list of possible locations at times when I thought they should be. Now, there are times that I knew the path of locations that you had to take to get to a place, and that was normal, but there were times where it seemed like a location should have been on my menu and it wasn't there. Now, this didn't happen too often, but it did happen a couple times. The only thing I'm not really certain of is this was a bug or if this was just the way they poorly designed the menus. Regardless, that's about the only thing that I really experienced. There were just times that I thought I should be able to go to a location from this location, and that wasn't an option, and I'd have to like move around to a number of different locations before that option would actually appear. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy introduced me to the first 3 games of the Phoenix Wright series. It's a game series that is both really memorable, but can be a little frustrating at the same time. It largely works, but there are some issues around the edges that just didn't always set well with me. I can definitely see why the series is a popular one with memorable characters, music, and some very interesting story beats. Even then, some of the cases here are much better than others, and the experience may be a little uneven at times. While gameplay is solid, it is also fairly basic and definitely very connected to the story aspects of the game, which could feel limiting to some people. Given this, I'm rating the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy an 8 out of 10. Series is definitely not a top favorite of mine, but it's definitely a game that I'd be willing to replay and be interested in looking at later games in the series. There is a collection of these sequel trilogies scheduled for release in 2024, so I'm definitely interested in taking a look at that when it's released to see who comes back in that trilogy and what they're up to after these first 3 games. It may have taken me 20 years to finally give the Phoenix Wright series a try, but I had an enjoyable time with it. You're probably not going to enjoy it if you don't like visual novels or adventure style games, as it draws a lot from these 2 genres. If you don't object to these genres, then I'm sure you'll find an enjoyable time taking a look at this collection, whether you're familiar with the series or coming to it for the first time.